Hey there, YouTubers. So we are streaming live on YouTube while Jonathan goes and takes care of some housekeeping there with his thermostat so he's got a converted garage and he's got this heater that sounds loud. So that's what we're doing. And he's back.
Okay. Yep. We get to hear ourselves. There we go on YouTube.
Yeah. It's funny though. I know what you're talking about because I remember when I was in there and we do the shows in the studio there. But you don't really hear it that much on this end.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Well, that's good to know because it's must be just coming through my my headset big time. And so it's like I'm going through a wind tunnel or something.
Yeah,
so.
I mean I've heard it before, but it's not like super distracting or anything. So all right, well let's kick it off with some beer talk on this episode. I'm excited about mine, but I'll let you go first.
Oh man. So you had you got my curiosity going there. So I got to wait a few more another couple of minutes at least.
That's how I roll. It's all about the intrigue.
All right. So what I've got today is a milk stout nitro from Left Hand Brewing Company. I'm a big fan of Left Hand. We've had
I recognize that bottle. I've seen that bottle.
Yeah, and this is their nitro stout. I don't think we've had this one on. We've had some of their stouts in the past, but this is a very crisp, dark, and I would call it, because I've had this before. It's very dark, as you can see, not a really thick head, but not sweet. Even a little, might call it a little dry, but I don't know. I like it. It's good.
Yeah. So one of those you can go to. You know, if you want that kind of beer, you can go to it and not be super weird with it or anything like that.
No. It's nothing fancy, nothing special, but it's something that I don't mind drinking. So I can't give it like this rave review. Especially after you've teased your beer.
I know, right? So I'm excited about this because the type of beer it is, and it's a local. So I may go to the brewery this weekend if it's good.
Oh,
but and the price point was really good for the beer. So that makes me a little nervous, but at the same time excited because if it's good at this price point, like I may have to stock up.
Oh,
so it's from Strange Land Brewery, which is here in Austin.
Okay.
And it's a Russian Imperial Stout called No Collusion. In America, but here's the next thing: American bourbon barrels. That's what did me in. I was like, oh wait, this is a bourbon barrel stout, and it was a 4-pack for $10.
Oh wow,
which is pretty cheap for a bourbon barrel.
Oh yeah, absolutely
stout. So
I love that name. It fits perfectly for our upcoming podcast.
And it's got like it's hard to probably tell on the video, but like the black lines are like redacted stuff. Like there's words underneath them. So it's like, So
can you tell what the words are?
Yeah. So they're like, representative, extremely character, like it's only parts of the words. So, but yeah, it's definitely got that. I bet if I really sat down and tried to read the whole thing, it could probably, but I'd probably need my glasses for that. So
yeah, but
even then it's kind of hard to read. But then there's another graphic layer even behind that's kind of the silvery stuff. I don't know if you can see it, but
I do
in the light. So there's a lot going on the can. But yeah, it's Georgetown, Texas is where it's packaged, which is not too far up the road. It's not really Austin, but it's if you're in Austin, that's not Austin. If you're in Georgetown, though, it is Austin. So kind of depends on your perspective.
Sure.
Kind of like Farragut is not really Knoxville, but
that's right. It's their own. They've got their own little.
Yeah. So this one is 10.1% alcohol, which sounds about right for a Imperial Stout and bourbon barrels. So let's pour some up and take a whiff. Swig. So not a big head or anything. Fits perfectly in the old glass.
I didn't even know there was a Georgetown, Texas. You learned something new.
Yeah, it's right up 35. between Austin and Waco. So cheers.
Cheers. Like I said, this one reminds me of it just reminds me of a Guinness. What's that? That Guinness has their nitro, don't they?
Yeah.
So
So
it makes me think of a Guinness.
This is not nearly as thick as I was expecting, like a Russian Imperial Stout to be. It's definitely got more of the bourbon ale, as opposed to like it actually has a little bit more of the feel in your mouth has more like a ale feel than a stout. It's colored like a stout and it kind of tastes like, but it's feels a little lighter than I was expecting, which may be why it's only $10 for a 4-pack. But very good. Very good.
Very good.
Yep. I don't know if I'll stock up on it, but it's a good, if you want 10.1 alcohol and you want a dark beer.
So while we're waiting, what we got the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday.
We do.
What is the go-to beer of choice for the Super Bowl?
For me or for the public? Like, obviously, there's going to be 14 Bud Light commercials and Bud commercials. We'll see what the Bud Light Night does this year.
No, I'm talking what you will be consuming, not
what I will be consuming. Well, I have a whole bunch of half 4-packs and 6-packs in the fridge of stuff that we've had here on the show.
Oh yeah, so you've got some cleaning up to do. You got some mop up duty.
Yeah, I got some cleaning up to do so I can get some new stuff. So I'll just be raiding the beer fridge and clearing out the old stuff. So
see, that's a great idea because I've got the same problem. I've got all these extra beers from beers that we pick up the Sixers.
Yeah.
And so I'm going over to a small family Super Bowl party on Sunday evening. So what I'll be doing is bringing a lot of these leftovers.
Yeah. Well, it worked better when we were both there. We could kind of split the packs.
That's right.
And
we
went through them a little faster. So it's a little harder to do on this end, but
exactly.
But it is kind of cool because we get different parts of the country and different parts, different craft breweries that aren't in each other's states. So definitely kind of cool there. You got to, this will be fun because the podcast will come out after the Super Bowl.
Yep.
So got any predictions on 49ers Chiefs? Who's going to take it?
I gotta say, man, I'm with the Chiefs.
Really,
that's who I'm rooting for. Just because I was reading something on ESPN the other day. So the last time the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl was the very first one. So that's this is Super Bowl 54,
right?
And what's funny is the image. I was telling my wife about this, but so the image of the last time the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl, there's a picture of their quarterback at the time. His name was Lenny Dawson. And there's a photograph of him at halftime and he's in the locker room smoking a cigarette. So that should tell you how long it's been since the mighty Chiefs were in the big dance.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, back when you could run cigarette ads, and
if
you were a copywriter, that was the dream, is to write for a cigarette company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and doctors were recommending cigarettes back then. Not
yeah.
quite, I don't know if it's that far back, but there were those times when they were recommending cigarettes.
So what about you? What is your
Oh man, I don't know. I feel like the 49ers kind of have that destiny feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're kind of, it's their year, just they're supposed to win kind of feel.
Mm-hmm.
I think regardless, it's going to be a very high scoring game.
Yeah.
I think the days of defense wins championships are gone. I think they're gone. Our beloved Georgia Bulldogs have proven that fact.
Kudos to them because they have made a lot of changes, though.
Yeah, so we'll see. See if they're going to keep up with that. But I'm going to go with the 49ers. I don't know, just a gut feel. Mm-hmm. I really don't have, I don't really care one way or the other. Neither one of those are my teams. So, I guess I'll just go with the NFC because I like the NFC better.
I remember I was at a trade show last year. It was last April up in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I got a lift from the airport, I had an Uber driver that took me to the hotel where this big trade show was at, and we were just having a conversation. And the guy, they made it so close last year. They were in the AFC Championship, and the Patriots knocked them off. And this guy was just, he was like, we got so close, and we've been so close a number of times. I just don't think we're ever going to get there, with Tom Brady and the Patriots. And, it's just, that was our chance, and he was really kind of reeling from that. And here it is a year later. And hey, they're in.
All right. Looks like our guest has popped on the line.
Yes.
Hi there.
Hey, Patti. How are you?
Wonderful.
Good. So you
Patti,
figured out.
Welcome.
Looks like
Did you have any trouble logging on?
I'm here.
Okay. We're just making sure. Did you have any trouble logging into Zoom?
No, I logged in. I didn't do Zoom. I logged in through the U.S. phone number.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Cool. All right. Well, you're coming in, so that's good.
Awesome.
And we're on video, so you're just like this green circle with the telephone icon in it. And
okay. I'm looking very skinny today. I can tell.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know who uses that type of phone anymore. That's on the phone icon on the internet.
Oh, that's
like it's like the old
the Barbie dolls still do, I think.
Yeah, the old timey handset, like with the cord on it and everything. It doesn't have a cord, but it might as well. So, well,
it's
Patti,
so much
welcome.
more distinctive than just a square. Somebody puts a square.
Right.
They don't know what you're referring to.
Exactly. But I wonder though, like, are millennials? Do they understand what that picture is? Like seriously, and then the generation below that, like, are they going to look at that and be like, what is that? I don't know what that button's for.
I saw that once somewhere in a history book.
Yeah. So,
well, Patti, we are very pleased. Thank you for spending some time with us on the show today. I want to give our listeners an introduction and just to share a little bit about your background. We have Patti Wood joining us today. She is the author of the book Snap, Making the Most of First Impressions, Body Language, and Charisma. So the topic today, we're going to be talking about body language and charisma, and how persuasive can someone be, using body language. We've kind of hit on that a time or two in the past on the podcast, but Sean and I have never had a body language expert on. So this will be really interesting.
Okay.
And so I just want to give our listeners your background. You're an internationally recognized nonverbal communication and human behavior expert. You've conducted years of research in the field of human behavior. You've been on a number of shows. You've been interviewed. I saw your clip on Regis and Kelly. You've been on Fox News, Good Morning America.
Yeah, that was my first national TV interview many, many years ago. I do about 2 to 14 national and international media interviews a week and have for a few decades.
Oh, that's great. Well, I was watching the one that the video on that you had on sleep, the sleep positions and what they reveal.
Yes.
And that interested me because my wife and I, we just got a new bed. And so we've been for years, I've been complaining about our old bed, and we finally went out and bought a new one because my sleep position changed because the mattress on the old one was just, I don't know what it was. It was just, to me, it was wearing thin. My wife liked it. It was comfortable, but I was like, you know what? I'm getting, because I'm turning on my side. That's not my normal sleep position. So there's got to be something to that.
Right.
I normally sleep on my back, but now I'm turning on my side. So that's got to reveal something to you. I think I'm kind of like turning away from you and showing you my disdain while I sleep.
You won't let me get a new bed. I'm going to turn away from you in my sleep.
So she did.
Send you a nonverbal message of disdain.
Yeah.
But it totally worked. We got a new bed. So, hey, that's
awesome. Okay.
So let's talk about your book. I want to get into it. Sean, we're going to, I've got Patti's book pulled up here. But first, before we get started, tell us a little bit, kind of give us a brief snippet of your background in the field of human behavior and body language.
Okay. Well, it's what I have all my degrees in. And I used to teach body language at Florida State University. And it was a really popular class for some reason. I guess the title, I had about 150 to 175 students every semester. And people in Tallahassee, which is the state capital, started to call me up and say, can you come and speak to our business or our state agency? And I had clients like the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and since then, federal agencies currently, and taught interviews and interrogation techniques. So all my research over the past few decades has been in nonverbal communication. And I typically go around the country as a professional speaker and a consultant, helping companies improve their interactions, whether it be sales or customer service, or persuasion, or leadership and credibility and honesty, or deception detection.
Wow.
So that deception detection is pretty interesting stuff. I want to hit on that here a little bit later, because that intrigues me.
Well, there's some aspects that we can talk about as it relates to charisma.
So, Jonathan, this is not a marital counseling show. That's not what we're doing here. So,
well, I had all these notes that I was going to give my wife.
Right.
Or maybe it's for your teenagers.
That's right. Yeah.
We can talk about that as well.
Oh my gosh.
Differences and age differences.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I could spend a whole episode on that. I have 2 teenagers right now, and there is
call me later. We'll talk.
For the oldest, there is some communication issues at times, but let's start out. Tell us, in terms of the impressions that people make through body language. Is it possible? So we're currently talking on the, you're on the phone. Sean and I can see each other through video. I'm just curious. Can you typically, are you able to read people? Is there a way to read people without seeing their face?
Yes, you're using, there's nonverbal communication is the bigger umbrella of science, and body language is underneath that. So we're using what is called para-language. That includes nuances of the voice and breath, like voice tone, tempo, speaking rate, volume level.
Sure.
And all those aspects actually reveal an enormous amount of information. There's many researchers that feel that paralanguage is the best way to distinguish honesty. And there's even technology that exists right now that can tell through voice stress analysis whether somebody is lying through just the audio.
Right.
So can you define for the listeners and for myself, like paralanguage, like how would you define that?
Well, it's a fairly large grouping of anything like right now, the pauses I have, the breath, the way I hit or strike a consonant, the hard T's and the K's, that I tend to over-articulate because I'm a professional speaker. So that affects how people interpret my message and the credibility of my message. Whether somebody speaks slowly or fast can reveal things about their personality type on inventories like the Myers-Briggs and the DISC. And it may be an indication of self-esteem and other issues. So all those different aspects can work on the limbic system, the limbic brain that picks up on nonverbal cues. And one of the magical, incredible properties of the limbic system is that even on the phone, we can pick up so many cues. If we were face-to-face, we could exchange up to 10,000 nonverbal cues in less than a minute.
Wow.
So there's enormous amounts of data available to the limbic system to draw conclusions from and to be able to evaluate and even do really simple calculations. Is this person safe to approach?
So
can I trust this person?
Yeah. So when you say 10,000 nonverbal cues in less than a minute, is that just the first minute? Like, do we have more that we take in the first minute?
No, that's just a revelation of how much can be done in any minute of interaction. How much data is potentially available to us in just an interaction with one other person. So again, you can exchange up to 10,000 cues. When one other person, 10,000 cues, and compute those. And the thing that makes it sort of hard to even comprehend is that limbic system is not where word language is based. So we don't have word language sometimes. We just have a feeling or a gut, something's not right, or I don't like this person, or I really like this person, or when he said the price, I felt like he wasn't confident, or when he made that request, I just doubted a little bit. We're coming to those conclusions. We don't necessarily tie it to logical thinking that's done in the neocortex.
Okay, so I'm going to go off the rails here a little bit, but I don't know if are you familiar with the concept that Dr. Cooper wrote about in the other 90%, his book, where he talked about the 3 brains that we have, where we have like a brain in our head, in our heart, and one in our gut, like nervous.
Actually, it's in more recent research says there's more than that.
Cool.
And for example, there's all that I believe from my research, because I obviously keep up with everything that affects the interpretation of nonverbal cues. There's even and again, the definition of brain is a new definition of brain from what we learned in 6th grade biology. But there's a brain in the eye. And one of the duties and responsibilities is to look at human silhouette to know whether that person is dangerous. So a human silhouette might have the arm raised, weapon-like. And so that brain in the eye reads that silhouette and calls forth the body to action. And the reason there's a brain there instead of going all the way to the main brain is so they can take action more quickly to protect or defend. So all of this it's just sort of amazing that like the brain in the eye, that's less than 10 years ago that they realized there was something that could redefine that was helping us in our survival that was based on nonverbal communication.
And I've heard that most of these other brains, and that's a new one to me, but it sounds like anywhere we have like an abundance of nerves, that's all right. It's becoming a brain. And they're all faster than the brain that we've been taught, like you said, since 6th grade biology.
The main brain, right.
The main brain.
Right.
They're actually all faster than that brain. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's I can't say that with absolute certainty. The ones that I have studied, their placement, the fact that they're there is because they need to comprehend certain information and act upon it faster than it could if it had to go all the way to the main brain, if that makes sense. Interesting.
Okay. Sorry about that little side rail, but like I could, we geek out on this stuff. So, and a lot of our listeners do too. So
absolutely.
I'm a science junkie, obviously. I have picked the right career.
Yeah. No, this is fascinating stuff. So, so that's interesting. So far, we've covered like all kinds of crazy stuff, like so the paralanguage, the 10,000 cues in a minute that we can exchange with each other, different types of brains in our body, and all of this is happening non-verbally, and
it's happening in a snap.
Yeah, in a snap. Somebody should write a book.
That's right. That'd be a good title.
So I'm curious. So you've got a chapter. What happens at a snap? Understanding the 4 first impression factors. And so
correct.
I'm curious about this because the old saying is people first impression makes the difference. So whatever people, if you haven't met somebody, you're meeting a total stranger for the first time, they are already forming an opinion of you right away. I mean, just like
right
that.
away.
And so let's talk about these things because I'm curious. You've got credibility, likability, attractiveness, and power.
Right. Those are the 4 first impression factors.
Yep.
Exactly.
So what makes people think, what would, if I'm meeting someone for the first time, a total stranger, what are the things that I need to be aware of that I'm that I'm presenting to them that I may be totally unaware of, that could be hurting my credibility just in a split second?
There's everything. Everything is affected.
Besides me talking.
So you need to be nervous about everything.
Okay.
Let's just talk about things that are really easy to focus on consciously. For example, I was with some friends at a concert the other night, and there were some people that I realized didn't know other people, and they didn't know everybody's name, and so there was this. They froze in place. They did not approach the people that they knew, but they didn't know everybody's name, and they froze in place. And what was interesting for me, because I see this all the time, happen all the time, is that frozen in place position, which is part of freeze, flight, fight, fall, or faint response. Okay, they're doing it because, oh God, I'm about to be embarrassed. I don't know their name. But the person or people around were looking and saying, well, they're not very friendly.
Yeah.
There they are looking frozen in place instead of approaching warmly and opening up their body and coming forward and smiling and hugging. They're not doing what would be normal. So anybody that was seeing that interaction for the first time would go, well, what's wrong with them? And yet there's that hesitation is based on a fear. Does that make sense? So that's affecting your first impression. So even simple techniques like go forward, instead of freezing in place, go forward and greet warmly. You can always apologize.
Yeah.
But that very first initial impression is causing a misinterpretation of who you are.
So if you're in a situation where you've forgotten somebody's name, is it better to just go up to them and just say, hey, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name?
Right. Or please forgive me. Your name has slipped from my mind and I really want to introduce you to this person. You're a great person and I want to introduce you to my friend or something. But
right.
What I find is that if you miss that first moment, if you freeze in place and you resist interaction, it causes a problem. The same thing happens.
Sure.
I have a whole chapter in my book on handshakes and greeting behavior. And the reason I did that is because I noticed in my first 8 years of speaking on body language across the country that people would always come up afterward and say, I don't know how to shake hands, or what do you do when somebody does this, or I don't know who to introduce first. So there was all this fear around shaking hands or shaking hands appropriately, or how do I do it according to etiquette. And I see people resist shaking hands also because of fear of germs, like the whole Purell generation. Yeah. So that's another instance where you might not know what to do, or it's flu season and you don't want to shake hands. And so you might freeze in place, not approach, and not have a warm interaction. Mm-hmm. And that's a big price, because something as simple as a handshake has been shown in the research to establish rapport very quickly. So it scientifically, it's a way to say I hold no weapon, and also, this is going to get real sciencey, exchange chemicals. There's a chemical read when you touch that you pick up information. Part of it is genetic information. Part of it is this person safe?
Sure.
That you're missing out on if you don't shake hands. So if you're talking about what should I be afraid of when first impressions, I say overcompensate, greet warmly, be the first person to greet in a room so you look powerful and confident. Okay. Make eye contact right away, smile right away. All these things that you might hesitate or be unsure about, go ahead and just overcompensate for.
And so I'm going to guess, Patti, that's important, because if we're not doing that and we're scared, like we're sending a message either way.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So if we're hiding, we think we're protecting ourselves by playing it cool or not embarrassing ourselves, quote unquote. But what we're actually doing is we're coming off as unfriendly, uncooperative, not safe for the tribe. So just
not confident. All sorts of things. And I say this, and it sounds so simple, but I speak to business owners and C-suite level executives across the country, and they've been saying for a good 5 years, we have employees that won't shake hands. We have people that come for job interviews now that refuse to shake hands. What would be a normal interaction that creates bonding and rapport, like a handshake is equal to 3 hours of face-to-face interaction and its ability to establish rapport. Something simple like that.
Could you say that again? Could you say that stat again?
A handshake has been shown in the research to be equal to 3 hours of face-to-face interaction in its ability to establish rapport. In other words, if we go into a meeting and let's say I come in and I have my phone in my hand and I don't shake hands with you. The research says it takes on average 3 hours for us to get to the same level of rapport and trust that we would have had we shaken hands.
That is amazing.
And by the way, there's even a bigger gender difference that men feel like I can't trust him. I can't.
If he doesn't shake my hand. Yeah.
If he doesn't shake my hand.
Right.
So that I think will change as women play more co-ed sports, but for that starting. If
you squirt like a little hand sanitizer in your hand before you shake the hand, does that?
Yeah, you can do it before.
Does that kill your credibility?
Before and after. Yeah, but I shake 100 to 500 hands a week before and after my speeches. Sure. I've been doing that for decades, and it's a way of establishing a rapport.
Yeah, I've opted out of the whole germ thing. So it just doesn't even bother me at all. So.
Yeah,
I'm curious on attractiveness because on the surface, people are like, okay, well, there's only so much. I mean, let's be honest. Attractiveness. There's perception in that, but there's also some reality to that as well.
Well, there's some science. Some of the basic science shows that attractive people get hired more. They're given more positive qualities, not necessarily intelligence for women, which is interesting, but they're given positive qualities of likability. So there's that. But
so how do you make yourself? Yeah. So the follow-up is, how do you make yourself more attractive? What are some things that you can do?
Well, to me, there's some simple things in that. And that is, for example, males are really, that as a gender, there's a gender-based difference. They like women that have clean, pretty nails. Such a strange little tiny thing can have an impact even in the first minute of interaction with a guy. They're looking at a woman's hands, which is, that's just one little tiny example. But attractiveness is a little bit more complex than that. Sure. The reason it's so high in those 4 first impression factors is actually something that has to do with symmetry of the body and face.
Okay.
So the limbic brain looks for symmetrical faces and bodies. So if you have, for example, a smirk on your face where one side is up and one side is down, okay, you're communicating that you're saying one thing and feeling another. And there's actually left brain, right brain properties of that. But if I'm looking at you, my limbic system looks at that smirk and goes, something's not right, something's not right, something's not right. I'm seeing the lack of alignment between your limbic system and your logical thinking brain. You're faking. You're trying to fake me out, but your body doesn't catch it in time. So part of your face does one thing and part of your face does the other. So that reads to me at that very instinctual level as something's not right. I'm uncomfortable. So that lack of symmetry, which is aligned with attractiveness, there's a scientific reason it makes us feel unsettled.
Okay.
Wow.
That's interesting. I was just making that face while you were saying it, and I was thinking to myself, I could see somebody looking at my face and saying, yeah, this guy really doesn't believe a word of what I'm saying, or doesn't believe
talking out of the side of their mouth.
Exactly.
Right. But you can do that. Even I teach public speaking and coach executives in speaking. And sometimes they'll be like lean out to the one side to say something, and I'll show them, I'll record them and I'll show them, and they'll go, oh my God, I wasn't confident in that. So when I was saying that, I did have some hesitation. I'm going, you're not balanced. So that's affecting how we perceive your message.
Wow. So there's a lot there. So does attractiveness change by the decade, or? Well,
there's definitely prejudice in terms of age. But that also bleeds over into power and alpha status as well. So there's those components. What's interesting to me is here are these 4 factors: credibility, likability, attractiveness, and power, that everybody everywhere uses to assess people when they first meet them and then reassess. They're constantly using those 4 factors. But we're talking about charisma.
Yeah.
Well, the 4 factors are credibility, likability, attractiveness, and power. You would think credibility is number 1. It is number 1. But bizarrely, charisma is based on the last 3. It totally X's out credibility. Charisma is determined by somebody's likability, attractiveness, and power. And when somebody's high in charisma, when somebody's highly charismatic, if you've ever known anybody in your life that was just highly charismatic, it overrides, if we're looking at them, we're listening to them on TV, if they're talking in a meeting, if we're dating them, their charisma overrides our brain's ability to determine whether or not they're credible.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's a bizarre override in the brain that when somebody's highly charismatic, we can't tell whether or not they're good or bad.
It doesn't matter what they say. They're just,
they have a superpower.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I call it a superpower.
Mm-hmm.
Are there
and they
different,
can use that superpower for good or for evil.
So Patti, are there different types of charisma? Like there's different personality types? Are there different types of charisma, or is it pretty standard?
Charisma is pretty standard in how people usually describe a charismatic person, and its effect on us. So, I speak across the country, and I always ask people, who have you met that was charismatic, or who do you think of as charismatic, and how will you describe them? If they've been in the presence of a charismatic person, they typically say, when I was talking with him, or when we were talking, or when I was talking with her, I felt like I was the only person in the room.
Yeah.
Or I felt like I was the most important person in the room.
Right.
Or I felt like, I was the most endeared person in the room. And that they have a way, again, can use those powers for good or for evil, of focusing in on a person.
Yeah.
With their eye contact, with the front of their bodies, which I call the body windows, like the whole face, the heart, the belly, they just focus. Nobody else matters when they're in that zone of focus and concentration on you. And it is a beautiful thing in its powers of good to make people feel seen, heard, and understood. It can just be amazing.
Yeah. That's powerful. Yeah.
So I was gonna say, I've heard, like, regardless of which side of the aisle you fall in politics, I've heard that said about most presidents of the last 50, 60 years. Like, regardless of if you stripped away the politics, when you hear the interviews or the biographies or reporters talk about presidents, they tend to have that. They say that about them. Like, when you're in the room with them, you understand why they're there. Like, it's just like really, like, the charisma is so thick, and they make you feel so special, which makes sense that they would get to that level of power.
Right.
Having that.
It's interesting because we determined that really quickly. If in the last debates, if you're talking about the last two candidates in the presidential debate, we determine typically in a fraction of a second, and I can even quote some specific research if you'd like, but typically we determine who's won that debate before they even begin speaking. We are looking for those charismatic factors of likability, attraction, attractiveness, and power.
Yep. That's pretty cool. So
even with the sound off, we've made the determination. Right.
Yeah. That's amazing. So we've talked about kind of the combination of the likability, attractiveness, and power. We've talked about credibility. We haven't talked about power specifically. Could you go there a little bit?
Yes. To me, that's what I feel like most people are thinking about in this next election, and wondering who can compete with Trump's alpha status.
Right.
Because typically we choose the taller, broader candidate. Again, a determination that's made in that limbic system before the candidates even speak, irregardless of their platform, of what they're saying or what they've done. So that to me is interesting. When I just analyzed the last Democratic debates, one of the things that I was looking for is who looks most alpha, who visually even just looks most alpha, who presents themselves as most alpha, since that has a bizarrely strong effect.
Yeah.
And historically in American politics, in American presidential elections.
Well, I can already tell you, it's interesting because to me, and we're not going to get into politics, but just judging candidates by their, by the way they present themselves. I look at Bloomberg, and here's a guy who's who's a successful billionaire, but he's got a big problem, and that's his height. He's like 5'6", and so when he gets on the stage, he looks like a really little guy. And I know that there's a history behind.
Right. Yeah. No matter what it is interesting. No matter how we think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Scientifically, there's been this override,
mm-hmm.
and to me, that's going to be interesting going forward. Are we going to go by our morals, our personal beliefs,
right.
the candidate's platform, or is it going to go back to that limbic system that has been historically true in our elections?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Patti, which one you thought was the most alpha out of the
well, there was different characteristics and it was interesting even visually.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie has the broader gestures, the more angular gestures, and is the loudest.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes up more space visually and auditorily.
Mm-hmm.
So I think typically if we're looking at just that, the broader gestures and the louder,
mm-hmm.
He wins on that, or at least he did in the last debate. But there's other factors. There's also the likability and attractiveness in charisma.
Right.
Do you think any of the current Democratic candidates have the charisma that you're talking about?
I think I'm going to hold my thought on that.
we don't want to put you on the spot there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I certainly have a candidate that's running for president, currently that I favor personally, that I see certain things that I like, so if I'm analyzing for the media as a scientist, even that, I would like a stronger charismatic person in that
mm-hmm. pool.
Yeah.
And to me, like you said, I'm of your opinion. It seems like of everyone there, politics aside, Bernie is probably the most outspoken.
Bigger. He's bigger.
Yeah, he's bigger.
And vocally and just in terms of the width of his gestures and how he comes up and away from his body.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a gender-based difference there because in terms of our gender bias, women have to walk a very narrow line. If we get too big and broad,
mm-hmm.
Especially if we're making a strong definitive statement that's negative, it can be read quite differently than if a man even makes that same gesture. I'm 5'2",
mm-hmm.
and I gesture really big.
Yeah.
And I move around the room when I speak. I go out off the stage into the audience. And one of the reasons I've done that since the beginning of my career is for the audience to see me as powerful, alpha, and confident in that space.
See, to me, that's super interesting because I totally agree because, I was referencing Bloomberg earlier. I think he's like 5'6". He's a shorter guy. But he doesn't come across as he doesn't overcome that with his outgoing nature. I think of like an actor like, oh goodness, what's the,
Tom Cruise is a little actor.
Yeah, he is. He's a shorter guy, but you don't think of him, but I'm thinking of.
Yeah, but he has a big head. So on a screen, movie screen, he looks big.
Right. True.
Seriously, there's a whole theory of big-headed actors and their success on the big screen. Mm-hmm.
Al Pacino was the guy.
A couple pieces on. Same thing, big head.
Yeah, Al Pacino is, to me, he's a short guy, but he doesn't seem short to me when he's in all the movies. He seems like the toughest guy in the room or the most confident, the most outgoing. So I never picture him as being little, just the way he presents himself.
So that's I mean, that's a great little trivial fact, Patti, that you brought up. So for our listeners, if you've got a big head and you've always been embarrassed, video may be your thing for advertising, for marketing.
You are cool. A media darling. You're great on TV. You're great on a big screen. Great on a screen with a headshot, like the chest. What I call the chest up shot they use in news stories. Boom.
Yeah, and social media profile images, all that stuff would play to you. So, wow, that's incredible. So, I mean, that's just one chapter, Jonathan, that we've talked about so far. I feel like we could go for hours on this stuff. But I want to.
Go ahead. Because I got one last thing. I want to talk about the determining whether somebody is telling the truth, because that's like negotiation stuff. And
we'll get into family counseling later.
Well, I can tell you, I have a 3-day workshop on deception detection. I do hour keynotes on it, but I have a 3-hour workshop on it, because once you go in there, my feeling is ethically, I want to teach you the key aspects of it so that you use it with integrity. So what I can tell you in a short amount of time is probably the most valuable thing for your listeners. And that is what's the most quickest and most effective way to tell whether or not you can trust somebody. And this one is different than you read in popular literature. Instead, what the research shows is that you have to know what honesty and integrity looks like, feels like, sounds like, how it feels to be with somebody that's in integrity. So I ask people, and I can just ask the listeners to do this, is to think of somebody in your life, at any part in your life. It can be from your past or right now, currently present in your life, somebody that you know and feel has integrity, that's an honest person that you can trust. Just think about that person and imagine that person, and then imagine yourself in the presence of that person, like you're sitting with that person. And how do you feel when you're with that person, whoever that is, when you're with this person you can trust? How do you feel inside your body? Okay, so whatever you're thinking and feeling inside your body right now, that's what I call true north.
Okay.
And what's happening is your central nervous system, when you're in the presence of somebody of integrity that you can trust, that's being honest with you, your central nervous system is calm. So typically people describe being in the presence of that person as feeling safe. I feel safe. I feel at ease. Some people will say, I feel energized, as if I could do anything and it would be okay. I could say or do anything and it would be okay.
Sure.
But most people say, I feel safe. And that is actually because your central nervous system is your human lie detector. And when you're with that person, you feel good, you feel at ease, and you're not wasting energy being stressed out. And what happens is when you know a person like that, and you now, like in a conversation, a business conversation, you're talking to somebody, suddenly you go, my stomach's a little bit upset, or I'm feeling a little bit nauseous, or I got a little bit of a headache, or I'm just really whipped, I'm exhausted. What's happening is your central nervous system is on a high alert, and your blood pressure rises, your heartbeat changes, you might flush to the skin and start sweating, because your body wants to go into freeze, fight, flight, fall, or faint, or all of those. It's trying to get out of that situation because it's saying alert, 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 alert. And the sirens are going off in your body. It's hard on your body, so it doesn't feel good. But here's the other part of that. It's a little bit scary to me, a little bit sad. I will sometimes have, if I'm, let's say, in a tech company, and most of my audience is under 37, and I say, okay, think of that person, and they do an exercise around that, and how many people had that person? There will be people in my audience that don't have anybody in their life, in their past or currently, that they can say is an integrity, that's honest, that they can trust.
Wow.
And what the research has found is if you don't have that person, if you haven't had that person, you're always on high alert and you don't trust people. And I do work, have done work in the past with the foster care system, and guess what? The kids that the ones that get out of the problem of all the problems with foster care and don't end up in prison, don't end up in some horror situation, will often have a story. It just makes my heart break, where they'll say, I had this teacher, or I had this social worker, or I had this foster mom, and I could trust her, or I could trust him, and it made all the difference in my life. And they'll tell these stories. And that affirms what the research says is you've got to have at least that one person
Sure.
that you can trust to be able to determine honesty or not.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because, you know, in any, you know, scientific experiment, in any, you know, if you're in marketing, you're doing, you know, split testing, like you got to have a control. You got to you got to have something to base results off of. So yeah, that would make complete sense that if you don't have that person, that you're just guessing at that point.
Yeah. And I also encourage, if I'm dealing with high-level executives that do high-level negotiation or in situations where they're not necessarily with people that they know and trust, I say, you've got to balance your life out. You've got to have some good people, you know, good family members, good friends, good business partners that you can rely on and trust to balance that out, because otherwise your alignment on your true north gets messed up.
Right. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to wrap with, Jonathan and I were talking, Patti, before the show. We were asking about, I wondered like how, like in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of talk about, well, you got to wear a suit, you got to wear a tie, you got to be clean shaven, like, and like the dress code, and like that doesn't seem to play as big of a role as it used to, or is that just wishful thinking and people just gotten casual?
It's complex.
Okay.
And part of it depends on, it's not a simple answer anymore.
Okay.
So part of it depends on the business culture. So I might coach high-level executives that are wanting to go get promoted up to the C-suite or transfer to a company and get promoted up. And they have to think of the culture of that business, because the business standard of dress affects the perception. So if they go in overdressed thinking, hey, I'm applying for, you know, CFO, I've got to dress in suit and tie. And they go in and let's say it's, it might be the home design industry.
Mm-hmm.
And they go in like that, the person hiring them is going to go, this guy doesn't know us at all. He doesn't fit in.
Yeah.
So, and there's also research that your dress, and this makes perfect sense, your dress affects your output. So like people that work from home say, well, I've got to get dressed before I go sit down at my computer. And well, there's a reason, because it can affect your output.
Yeah.
And that's directly correlated to uniforms and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. So obviously if you're going and having a meeting on Wall Street, it's going to be different than if you're with a tech company in Austin.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, going back to some of the candidates, you know, on the Democratic side, you know, when I've been watching some of the primaries, and some of them kind of made the, you know, would walk out, you know, they were doing the, when they were doing the debates, and that I would notice a few of them didn't have ties on, or one or two of the candidates didn't have ties. They're
that's one of the most simply dramatic things ever.
Yeah.
It's really the first time we've ever seen that.
Right.
And I think it aligns with what Democrats might be looking for. I want somebody that's like me, that understands me, that understands my daily life.
Sure.
And that's very different than how we've voted in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In terms of that visual, I want somebody who's in charge. I want somebody who's a leader. I want somebody who's the king. Would be how we voted historically.
Mm-hmm. And you think that's shifting?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. So we're looking for buddies instead of leaders.
Well, we're looking for somebody that might understand our daily life and our daily struggle.
Yeah.
I think that's a kind of interesting new issue.
So somebody that
non-verbally.
So my copywriting brain is kind of trying to kick in and figure out how to phrase that. So it's like somebody who's with us, not over us.
That's what's going to be interesting, because it's a change, and they're making the change visually with how they're dressing. Is it going to work?
Right. Is it going to translate into votes?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Well, like I said, we could talk all day about this. You've been very generous with your time, and the books. I'm definitely getting a copy of the book, and I'm sure Jonathan will too.
Wonderful, thanks.
And we'll tell our listeners. But Jonathan, unless you've got anything else, I'll let you wrap up.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. It's been very interesting. And when you're on a subject like this, time tends to get away. But love to have you back on again sometime, Patti, because there's a few, there's actually a few chapters that we didn't get a chance to hit that I would be, that are pretty intriguing. But in the meantime, as Sean said, I think the best thing to do is grab your book, and that is Snap. And we'll be putting a link from our show page to that, but also people can find out, to find out more about you and what you're doing, Patti. The best place to find that would be over at your website, pattiwood.net.
Patti at pattiwood.net is my email. They can send me questions, and the website is pattiwood.net.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again. As Sean said, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate your time today, and we hope you have a great weekend.
You take care. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
Thanks.
That was great. Thanks.
Are y'all still on?
Yeah, we're still on, but we're no longer recording now. So
okay.
That was great.
Right.
That was very interesting.
Oh, good. Well, I love what I do. I really love it.
I can tell.
Yeah,
we can tell it from from the nonverbal communication or the verbal communication.
The parameters. Right. I got a page full of notes here, so I'm looking forward to getting the book and diving a little bit deeper into this. I had one question that didn't come up on there.
Sure.
Do you think any of this translates into writing? And we have so much written content on the web and other places.
There's nonverbal factors in text and emails, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I know that as a writer. I just didn't know what the science showed. Like all writers have a feel that happens.
Yes. And but to me, one of the things that are kind of interesting currently that are affecting it, in fact, I've been talking about this with audiences a lot in the last couple of years, is things like ghosting.
Mm-hmm.
Where people, I was just talking with a client last night. She interviews potential doctors for hospitals and healthcare situations, and they'll be hired. They'll have interviewed and come to to wherever it was in the U.S. where the interview was. They'll show up, they'll do the interview, and then they'll disappear.
Wow.
They'll be hired for a position as, let's say, an emergency room doctor at a major hospital in a major city. And then they'll just disappear. And part of that is there's a shortage.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll interview for tons of jobs.
Oh,
and and people don't want to have that difficult conversation, so they just ghost. They just don't respond.
Yeah. Wow. That's why they overbook flights and overbook restaurants and everything else.
It's interesting because my clients are saying, instead of having multiple interviews with just like 2 people, we have multiple interviews with 6 or 7 people, because we have to assure that we get a person in that spot. And we, even at high levels, we're having candidates ghost us.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling. It's just really
that wouldn't work in other. That's crazy,
Yeah.
because that would catch up with you in some other professions, maybe not, but like you said, there's such a shortage that probably
there's such a shortage, and they don't think that it's going to. Yeah, they don't think, well, they won't keep track of me. I didn't show up.
Yeah.
Right.
It won't have any repercussions. But that alone as a nonverbal, who would have thought in a trillion years that people wouldn't show up?
Right.
Yeah. I wonder
or respond to here we accept you for a job and not respond.
I have a feeling that's some bleed over from our virtual world, that it's okay to do that.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
There's no consequences. You don't have to have the difficult face-to-face conversation.
Right. Exactly.
So it's
fascinating.
kind of, yeah.
And sad at the same time. I read an article this week about how human interaction is going to be the new luxury good in the future.
Well, I have already found that my clients value it so much. They hold that ability to be able to initiate a conversation, meet a stranger, have rapport, develop a long-term relationship. That skill set, if people can have it or they can develop it, it's going to be really critically important to a certain level of jobs. certain level.
And it's,
right.
and you know, if you have that skill set, you'll never worry about being replaced by AI or whatever, you know, artificial intelligence, because there's never going to get to a point where artificial intelligence can, you know, connect with someone or
not
to
in
a
the same
deeper
way.
level.
No.
Yeah.
So I have people now that email me. They want to hire me as a professional speaker to come speak to like 1,000 people, and they don't want to talk to me before the event.
Just show up.
Okay. Really, just show up. That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't want to have to get on the phone with you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's too hard. It's tough.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I can't imagine
that cookie. Who would have ever thought that?
Yeah.
I mean, that happens to me as a freelancer. Like, I get clients that hire me. Like, I want to get to a phone conversation. They're like, "No, we can just keep it on email. We're good." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Isn't that interesting? What that does? There's okay. I can go all in my science again, but it affects the interaction. So the interaction doesn't have as much value. So the relationship with your client doesn't have as much value to them.
Right.
So they can treat you poorly and they can dispose of you more easily. And
exactly.
so it's very interesting. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we'll let you go. We appreciate your time again. And
thanks, Patti.
We'll definitely have you back on. We'll reach back out.
Thank you. And please send me the recording.
Oh, we sure will. We'll have it to you on Monday. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Man, that was much better than I expected.
Me too. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. You can tell she's been on a lot of interviews and other stuff.
Oh, so. She knows her stuff.
Yep. All right. Go grab your beer.
Yep.
I've already got mine. So I just got to close my window because the sun's coming in.
Yeah. You're getting the glory.
Like glow. Yeah.
Sorry, I was having a snack.
That's right. I've got a little bowl here too.
What do you got?
Trail mix, like chocolate covered nuts, raisins, and then yogurt covered raisins.
I love trail mix.
The black and white. I think it's called black and white from Target.
Mm-hmm. I love the yogurt covered.
Yeah.
Raisins. Those are so good.
Good for snacking while you're hiking or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Or doing a podcast.
Yeah.
So I was reading through her blog post on the candidates. She wrote an article. So she put Sanders in first, Warren in second, AK Cortez, I guess, third.
Cortez? Who's that?
Alexandria Cortez. Is she still in it? Is that who it is?
She's not even running.
AK. Who is AK? AK.
I
I don't know who that is.
don't know. Gabby. There's a Gabby. AK. Who would that be? I don't know. They're not. They don't matter. No one knows them.
Right.
Biden and Sanders and
Warren probably.
And Warren are the three.
Yeah.
And poor Joe, he will never. They better hope he's not the guy that wins, because that guy is.
He's toast. Yeah.
He's going downhill every day. I saw a clip of him kind of berating a guy for not. He's like,
yeah, the clips that are out on him are going to be such easy pickings for commercials.
The guy's like, well, I'm going to vote for you in the general, but I'm not voting for you in the primary. And he goes, well, don't ask me for anything. They caught him, basically they caught him on camera. It's like, well, don't ask me for anything. Go away if you're not going to vote for me.
Yeah, it feels like Sanders is going to be crazy and socialist, so that's going to be an easy enemy.
Yep. Yeah,
and then Warren could come across as just like our guest said, when women are too strong, they come across as bitchy or whatever.
Yep.
And I think she could come across like that when she gets into intense debates. That's going to be her problem.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see out of those two which makes it through. So, all right, we're still striving. What are we doing? Streaming. That's the word I was looking for.
Oh shoot, I forgot.
On YouTube, a little behind the scenes, and
all right.